I guess this story started with a man I never knew. I knew of him, but I had never met him or even seen a picture of him. My mother had two brothers named Wendell and James. Sometime before I was born, James did something that embarrassed or greatly embarrassed the family, and he left. As I grew older, I would sometimes hear my mother or grandmother say, "I wonder where James is now." And when I asked who James was, I would abruptly change the subject. It wasn't until I was 17 that I learned James was my uncle, and at 19 I learned why he was the outcast in the family. My uncle Wendell was married to a woman named Betty, and one day he came home unexpectedly to find Uncle James busy making a two-backed beast with Aunt Betty. When the smoke cleared and the dust settled, Uncle James ran away and the family ostracized him. As far as I know, no one in the family ever saw or spoke to him again. That's not to say no one wanted to. My grandmother took his absence hard. At family dinners, when she said a prayer, she would ask God to watch over James and keep him safe. She did this even though Uncle Wendell was a sore spot for her. At the mention of Uncle James, he would cuss, throw his napkin, get up, and leave the table. It got to the point where he always came in late, and after the prayer had been said, so he wouldn't hear her. The years went by and life went on. When I was 20, my father left my mother for some woman he worked with, and that woman's husband tracked them down and shot them both. My grandmother passed away in her sleep when I was 22. Cancer took my mother when I was 29. Uncle Wendell was my last living relative, and a drunk driver cut his life short when I was 33. Curiously, the largest flower arrangement at the funeral home came with a card that simply said, "I'm sorry," and was signed with a single J. I was 35 when I received a letter from the law firm of Barton, Murray, and Weston asking me to contact them about an important case. It turned out that Uncle James had died and apparently never married or had children, and I, as his last living relative, had inherited his estate. A man I never knew left me $11 million. At 22, I graduated from the University of Michigan with a degree in civil engineering and a wife. I met Marcy on my first day on campus and fell head over heels in love with her. She was absolutely gorgeous and looked like the most beautiful woman I had ever laid eyes on. I was only 18, but I realized that if Marcy wasn't already busy, she would be soon. So I mustered up the courage to walk up to her, introduce myself, and ask her to have lunch with me. Shock, surprise, and stunned is what I felt when she agreed. Lunch was followed by a date, followed by several more, and then one wonderful June night, Marcy gave herself to me. For the rest of the year, we were inseparable. On Christmas Eve, I proposed to her and she said yes. We decided that we would both graduate from high school before we married. Life was good until spring break. Several of Marcy's friends wanted her to go to Florida with them, and she agreed. I was working part-time and couldn't get off work, so I had to stay home. I didn't want her to go. It was our longest separation since the first day of school. When she came back from her trip, we had fun as newlyweds, and then things started to change. We would make dates, and she would blow them off at the last minute. I would try to make a date for one day or another, and she would tell me she couldn't make it that night. I started hearing rumors about her spring break partying. A different guy was in her bed every night. Naturally, I didn't believe any of it until I was at a party one Saturday night. The party was at Stella Hansen's house, but I had to work that night, so I told Marcy I couldn't take her. She replied that she wouldn't go in that case, and we made arrangements to meet the next day. I was busy wiping down the tables when a couple of guys I knew walked into the restaurant. One of them, Harry Short, was surprised to see me working. "I saw Marcy at Stella's and thought you must be there too." Strange, I thought. Marcy had told me she wasn't going. I excused myself from work at 11 and headed over to Stella's. I walked in just in time to see Marcy coming up the stairs with a guy I didn't know, and they were holding hands. I was stunned and just stood frozen in place for a couple seconds, and then followed them. I had been to Stella's house before and knew that there were only 4 bedrooms and 2 bathrooms upstairs. When I got upstairs, I saw that the doors to both bathrooms and two bedrooms were open, and Marcy wasn't in the hallway. I may not be Sherlock Holmes, but even I could surmise where Marcy and the guy she'd come up the stairs with might be found. The only question was which of the two closed doors was Marcy behind. I stood there trying to decide, and just as I decided to put my ear to one of the doors and see if I could hear anything, the door opened and Charlie Smithers and his girlfriend came out. He smiled at me and said, "Trying to find a spare bedroom for you and Marcy?" I smiled, nodded in agreement, and watched him and Donna walk down the hallway and then down the stairs. I shifted my attention to another door and moved toward it, but then stopped. It had only been a few minutes, and if I had walked in right away, I might have caught them just sitting and talking. I needed to give them time to get their heads around the situation. I hoped like hell that it was something innocent, that they were just sitting and talking and had gone upstairs to get some privacy from the noise of the party. That's what I prayed. But the rumors of what Marcy had been up to over spring break and the fact that she was holding hands with the guy she came up the stairs with didn't give me much hope. I waited another 3 minutes and then opened the door and walked in. She was cheating on me right in front of me. Marcy's eyes were closed, and I leaned over to her ear. "Marcy, baby, open your eyes and be surprised." She opened her eyes, saw me, and her face lost some of its color. "Keep the ring, Marcy." I turned and walked out of the room while Marcy cried, "Oh no, oh God, no, please don't keep." And the door closing behind me cut her words short. As I walked down the stairs, I saw Nancy Newbert, one of the girls Marcy had gone to Florida with. I walked up to her. "Thanks for talking Marcy into coming with you for spring break. If she had stayed here, I never would have known she was a cheating whore." I turned my back on her and left the party. The next day I had to work, and around 2 Marcy came and sat in the booth. I refused to even acknowledge that she was there. Even though she was sitting in my department, I refused to wait for her. I sent one of the other waiters over to her, and he came back and said she wanted me, and that's why she sat in my section. Just tell her that if she is going to eat, you are her server, and that if she waits for me, she will starve to death. When I got off work that evening, I found Marcy sitting on the fender of my car. I walked past her and was just about to open the door when she slid off the fender and said, "We need to talk, Rob." "I've already heard everything I want to hear, Marcy." "He's not my new boyfriend, Rob, and that's exactly what I need to talk to you about." "Why do you need to talk to me about anything?" "I already heard about the revolving door in your motel room when you were in Panama City, and then the guy last night. And considering how many times you blew off dates with me, and how many times you just couldn't see me on a given night, I'm sure he's not the only one you've had since you got back from Florida. I even doubt Florida was the first. How many people did you stab in the back before? Spring break? Why do you even want to hang out with someone you have so little use for that you're having fun with others?" "It's not like that, Rob, and that's exactly why we need to talk." "I don't want to talk to you, Marcy. I don't even want to look at you. Just go away and leave me alone." "I can't leave you alone, Rob. You need to hear what I have to say, and I'm going to pester you, harass you, and stalk you until you listen to me." I didn't think I could stand it if she kept hanging around trying to get to me, so I decided to get it over with. "Get in the car, Marcy. I'll give you 10 minutes if you promise this is the last time I'll have to look at you." "I promise, if that's what you really want, after you hear what I have to say." I shrugged, got in the car, and reached over to unlock the passenger side door so she could get in. She sat down and turned to face me. "First of all, that guy last night wasn't my new boyfriend. You're my man, Rob, and you always will be." I started to say something, but she said, "No, Rob. You've only given me 10 minutes, so listen while I try to tell you everything. When I'm done, you can talk. The guy last night was just a guy I met at a party. He's the third one since I got back from Florida. And yes, I've met other guys on the nights we've had dates, but only 2 of them interested me enough to take them to bed. Before Florida, I'd never had anyone else. I don't know what you heard about what went on during spring break, but I didn't have a revolving door. There were only 2 of them. I wasn't a virgin when I met Rob, but I'd only had one boyfriend before I met you. He was the guy who popped my cherry, and after that he had me probably half a dozen times, and honestly, I didn't enjoy it much. It was like the old Peggy Lee song, "Is That All There Is?" You'll recall that I was in no great hurry to let you do it with me. But when I finally did, it was incredible. The difference between you and John was like night and day. Everything was great until I left for spring break. Honestly, I never intended to do what happened, but one night I was high at a beach party and this really cute guy proposed to me. He was trying really hard and I was high enough to let him keep trying. I thought about what it would be like to let him achieve what he was striving for. I thought about how different you are from John and wondered if this guy would be different from you and John. Then I decided that you were 2,000 miles away and would never know if I satisfied my curiosity, so I took him to my room. He was different from you and John. Not better than you or even better, but different. He was like an Energizer bunny. 2 nights later, I met another guy, and he was interesting enough to make me wonder what he could be like. He was different from you, John and Troy, but nothing earth-shattering. 2 weeks after I got back, I met Harry, and he approached me, and being curious after my experience in Florida, I tried him. Different again, but not better. When it was over and he left, I lay there thinking about everything. 5 different guys, and all different. Then I met up with Ralph. Again, not amazing, but different. I decided I wanted to try a dozen more to satisfy my curiosity before I quit. I never had any doubts that I was yours. I never doubted that you were the man I loved and wanted to spend the rest of my life with. But I had a curiosity and I thought I could satisfy it in a way that you would never know, and it turns out I was wrong. But that doesn't change the fact that I love you, and you are the man I want to spend the rest of my life with. Upset. She sat there looking at me, waiting to see what I would say, and after a few seconds I spoke up. And what do you expect me to say, Marcy? Way to go, girl. Satisfy your curiosity? I want you to say it doesn't matter. To say it doesn't matter? Are you out of your mind? Of course it matters. No, I'm not crazy, Rob. I don't know how many girls you had before me because we never discussed our previous lives, but you can't tell me you're not interested in other girls. I've seen the way you look at Sally Jennings. I've seen you watching Marsha Moss. Of course you were curious about that and more, but you never tried to satisfy that curiosity because you thought it wouldn't be fair to me. The time to satisfy your curiosity is before you stand before the preacher and take your wedding vows. That's all I'm doing, Rob. Taking advantage of the fact that I'm still single. My point, Rob, is that the time to satisfy curiosity and cravings is now, while we're still unmarried. Go have fun, but do it knowing that I love you and that I will still marry you if you agree. Go and play with Rob and don't feel guilty about it. You're serious, aren't you? Yes, I'm curious, and I want to satisfy that curiosity without losing you. Maybe we could arrange something like 2 weeks together and then 2 weeks apart. 2 or 3 weeks just us, and then another couple weeks to work on curiosity. What I ask, Rob, is that you trust me. Trust me that I will always be yours, just as you will always be mine. She showed me her left hand. I took your ring off, Rob, but I still wear it. It's on a chain around my neck. I ask you to believe that one day I will give it back to you and ask you to put it back on my finger. Please think about it, Rob. I repeat, I love you, and I don't want you to doubt that for a second. She got out of my car, walked over to hers, turned and kissed me, and then got in her car and drove away. Next chapter. I thought about her words, and my thoughts weren't too kind. They bordered on the phrase, "Screw that unfaithful whore." But she made some valid points. I fantasized about Sally and wondered. More than once about Marcia. If I had any kind of relationship with other girls, it would mean cheating on Marcy, and in my mind, you can't cheat on the one you love. But Marcy had cheated on me, so could she really love me? I really doubted it. I guess I could believe her first affair with Troy. I could put it down to the wild party atmosphere, to her drinking too much and losing control of herself. But a second boyfriend and 3 since she'd gotten back? No way. So I headed home, feeling exactly how any man would feel after his lover broke up with him. I was sitting on the couch, staring at the wall, when it came to me that sulking and pouting was stupid. Marcy had screwed me over, but it wasn't the end of the world. I was pretty cute, and there were thousands of Sally and Marsh around campus. It might take me a while to get over Marcy emotionally, but it could be done. And as for Marcy, getting revenge, getting back at the people who screwed you over, is part of human nature. It may never happen, but the desire to do it is always present, and I thought about it when I went to bed. The next day, I was sitting in class listening to Markham talk nonstop about data points, mean values, modes, and medians, and then it hit me. Give Marcy what she wanted. Why not? Give her a couple weeks of work and a couple weeks off like she wanted. Make her feel safe. And when the day came that she returned the ring to me to put it back on her finger, I would laugh in her face and throw the ring in the garbage. So that's what I did. Sam! I called her that night and told her I thought her plan was a good one, but only on one condition. I never wanted to see her with another man, and that meant we had to talk to each other a lot, even in the weeks we were apart so we wouldn't end up at the same party, the same dance, the same restaurant, or whatever. She agreed. The best part was that I was able to use this condition against her. I knew the places she liked to go, the people whose parties she liked to attend, and I always managed to get in first. Hey, sweetie. Just wanted to let you know that I'll be at David's party tomorrow night. Hi, Marcy. Just calling to let you know that tomorrow I'm taking my date to Augie's for dinner and then to the pit for a dance. Hopefully, she'll be so pissed about not being able to go to Dave's party or the dance at the pit that she won't have such a good time with whoever she's with. For the next 2 years, it went like this. 2 or 3 weeks with Marcy, and then a couple weeks playing in the field. I never got to have any fun with Sally, but Marcia did. There were half a dozen others, some of them good, some not so good. But as the saying goes, I've had good ones and bad ones, and the worst one was just fine. The only problem was that no matter how good a girl was, she wasn't half as good as Marcy, and I was looking forward to our weeks together. I didn't know how Marcy was doing during our time apart, but my impression was that no matter how much she dated, there wasn't much of a relationship. She stated that her goal was an even dozen, and she already had 7 when she told me that. A year into our relationship, I jokingly asked her how many notches she had on her bedpost, and she said, 3 more to go. Only 2 boyfriends in a year? I wanted to ask what her selection process was, but decided I didn't want to know and kept silent. And then Robin Atlee appeared on stage and things got interesting. Robin was very beautiful, smart, and witty, and for some reason Robin decided that I was the one she wanted as her soulmate. It was a unique experience for me. I had never been stalked before. Maybe I didn't put it quite right, but Robin started pursuing me before I even knew who she was. I was at a party that Marcy wanted to go to, but I had time to call first, and was leaning on the makeshift bar with a beer in my hand when a pretty-looking red-headed girl came up to me and said, "Hi, my name is Robin." I told her my name, whereupon she asked who I was at the party with, and I told her I was here for the bachelor party. She smiled broadly and said, "I'm here with a guy who turned out to be a big dumbass. I think you're cute, and I need a date for tomorrow night. What do you think?" I guess since I'm not completely dead, I should say, "Would you like to go out with me tomorrow night?" We had dinner, went to a show, and then went in for a drink afterward. As I walked her to the door, she said, "If I really like a guy, Rob, I usually kiss on the first date." And she went up on her tiptoes and kissed me. Robin said, "Do you want to try again tomorrow?" At the end of our 3rd date, as I was walking Robin to the door, she turned to me and said, "I'm a very direct woman, Rob, and when I see something I want, I get it. I want you, Rob." She opened the door, stepped inside, and then turned to me and asked, "Coming?" I followed her and was still there the next morning. Happy, feeling great but exhausted, and if you had asked me, "What do you think Marcy is doing right now?" I probably would have said, "Marcy who?" I had to work that day, and for the first time in my life I thought about taking a sick day and spending the day with Robin. But then she told me she had things to do, so I relented and went to work my shift. I spent the weekend between work and Robin's bedroom, and didn't see my apartment for 3 days. Monday was supposed to be the start of Marcy and me hanging out, but Robin wanted me to take her to an art gallery show, so when Marcy called me and asked what time I was coming over, I told her I'd be busy that evening. There was silence on the other end of the line. The first time I'd ever told her I wasn't coming to see her. And then she said, "How about tomorrow?" "I'm working tomorrow." "Oh, I guess I can wait until Wednesday to see you." "I'll call you." "Okay, baby. I love you. Bye." Wednesday, Robin was busy and I forgot to call Marcy. Thursday, I had to work after class, and 20 minutes before the end of my shift, Robin came in. "I was at the library and I asked Kathy to drop me off here so you could take me home." "I don't know about that. Every time I take you home, I find myself too tired to do much the next day." "Poor little guy. Do you want mommy to go easy on you?" "I don't know if you're capable of being easier. I just know I can't afford to fall asleep on business law again." "Okay, love. I promise I'll make sure you get a good night's sleep." On Friday, Marcy was waiting for me in the hallway when I got out of class at 3 o'clock. "What's going on, Rob? I haven't heard from you all week." "I've been busy, Marcy." "With that redhead I saw you with last night? I came into the restaurant to see if you'd have a drink with me when you got home from work, and I saw you leaving with her." "Her name is Robin, and yes, I was busy with her." "That should be our time, Rob." "Maybe so, but when I met her, I couldn't tell her not to forget about me, and I'll call her in 2 or 3 weeks." "I need my time, Rob. You'll just have to tell her you'll be busy for the next couple weeks." "I can't do that, Marcy." "Why not?" "Because I like her, Marcy, and there might be something between us. I might want to hold on to her." "What about me?" "What about you, Marcy? I never promised you anything. When you said you'd like to give me my ring back someday so I could put it back on your finger, I didn't say I'd do it. When you suggested your week-to-week plan, I agreed, thinking it might work. But I accepted the plan, knowing full well that I might meet someone else, just as you might find a man who would be so different that you would decide to leave him. You had confidence, Marcy, but you dismissed it because you were curious. You took a risk, Marcy. It's a crap game, and for now the dice keep rolling, and when they stop, we'll see what numbers fall out, yours or someone else's." "When will I see you again?" "I have no idea. When I get a free evening, I'll give you a call, and if you're not busy during the week, maybe we can get together." "Damn it, Rob, that's not fair. It wasn't about finding someone to replace you. It was just a timeout so I could satisfy my curiosity." "Never mind. Gotta run or I'll be late for the next class." Next chapter. For the rest of the week, school, work, and Robin kept me busy. Robin had to attend a family reunion out of town that weekend, and I didn't have to work on Saturday, so I called Marcy on Friday. "Geez, Rob, you should have called sooner. I already have a date for Saturday." "Okay, honey. Have fun. I'll see you around. Bye." Saturday night, I went to a party at Delta's house. Long-legged Marcia was there, and when her beau had been drinking, she asked me to drive her home. After leaving her at 11 in the morning, I went to the village inn to get breakfast and then headed home. Marcy's car was parked out front, and when I pulled up and parked next to her car, she got out of it and stood waiting for me. "I tried to call you last night, about 5 times. I canceled my date to spend time with you, but I still couldn't get through." I looked her straight in the eye and lied. "It didn't matter. You said you were busy, so when I hung up, I called someone else. I already had a date scheduled before you had time to cancel yours." "With who?" "None of your business, Marcy. I've never asked you the names of all your partners, and I'm not going to give you the names of the ones I'm dating." Okay, she said, then asked, "Since I'm here, can I come in?" Once inside the apartment, she immediately reached for me, but I pushed her hand away and she looked hurt. "Have you ever come straight to me after a meeting?" "Jesus, Rob, I would never do that." "I wouldn't do that either. You'll have to wait until I take a shower." She said, "I'll do your back." Later in bed, Marcy said, "I'm not a whore." "I never said you were." "No, you did. but not directly. There have only been 3 since we talked, and none of them lasted longer than 2 days. Almost 2 years and only 3? At this rate, you'll be 40 before you get over your dozen. I'll never get that dozen, Rob, because I've already satisfied my curiosity. All the ones I've had have been different, but none have been better than the others, and none have satisfied me like you have. No more experimenting, Rob. She took the chain off her neck and held it out to me. On it hung the engagement ring I had given her, and holding it out to me, she said, "Please, Rob." I stared at it for a few seconds and then handed it back to her. "I don't think so, Marcy." "Please, Rob, you know I love you." "So what, Marcy? You told me you loved me before I gave you the ring, but your love for me didn't keep you from cheating. You cheated on me twice in Florida, and cheated on me after you got back from Florida. If I hadn't caught you doing that, you'd probably still be cheating on me, constantly telling me how much you love me. I don't need a fiancé like that. If you feel that way, why didn't you end it with me then? Because you're the best piece of ass I've ever had, and when you came up with your week-by-week plan, I saw a way to keep entertaining you without being tied to you. It meant that if I didn't get lucky with another chick, I'd have you to lean on when my weeks came. You weren't going to put the ring back on me, were you? No. If it had just been one guy, the first one, in Florida, and you'd come clean when you got back, we probably could have worked things out, but you didn't. You deliberately went after the second one in Florida, and then the ones who were here after you got back, and like I said, if I hadn't caught you at Stella's party, you'd probably still be sneaking around behind my back trying to satisfy your so-called curiosity. You know that's not true, Rob. If I had been doing this, don't you think there would have been more than 3 in 2 years? I only got your word that there were only 3. I know there could be 300, and you're only saying 3 so you don't look like a hungry whore. You may or may not believe Rob, but it was only 3. Damn it, Rob. I love you and you know I do. There's never been anyone else who's meant anything to me. Don't chase me away. I'm not chasing you away, Marcy. I'm just not going to marry you. You're still the best piece of ass I've ever had, and you can stick around as long as you want. But all we'll ever be is buddies with benefits. I won't be able to change your mind if I'm not around, so I guess I'll just have to live with it. For the next 2 weeks, if I wasn't with Robin, I was with Marcy. And Marcy wasn't at all thrilled that I was spending time with Robin, but she knew where she stood and realized that she just had to deal with it or move on, and I knew she wouldn't move on. I suppose I could be called an asshole for taking advantage of her, and I did. I knew she loved me. I didn't doubt it for a second, and I knew she would hang in there until the last dog trying to find a way to get me back. And as long as she was around, I would never lack for girls. It didn't matter what was going on with the other girls because Marcy would always be there for me. There was only one problem. I loved that stupid bitch. I loved her, but I had always heard and believed that a cheater is always a cheater, and she cheated on me. Next chapter. Robin started talking about taking our relationship to the next stage, but I wasn't interested. Robin was a very beautiful woman, better than average in bed, and a lot of fun to be with, but she wasn't right for me long term. She had told me some time ago that what she wanted, she got. Robin was my girl whose credo was, "We'll do it my way, and we'll do what I want." I couldn't live with a woman like that, so I continued to ignore her hints until one day, true to her nature, she asked me to free up my Saturday so we could go ring shopping. I'm not ready for that, Robin. I am ready for it. We're not getting married until we graduate, but there's a lot to do. I've already told my mom to start preparing. I saw the exact ring I wanted at Zales. They open at 10 on Saturdays, so we'll be able to sleep in or have breakfast somewhere first. Didn't you hear what I said, Robin? I'm not ready to make a decision on that yet. And what is there to decide, Rob? A decision about getting married. I'm not ready to get married yet. And I am ready, Rob, so we need to move forward. I took a couple seconds to decide what to do. Give up a damn fine piece of ass or wait a little longer. I decided to get it over with. I'm not ready to even think about marriage with Robin yet, but when I am, it won't be with you. She looked stunned and then asked, "What the hell do you mean?" "I mean that I will never marry you. You're too bossy, and while I can put up with that while we're dating and keeping company, there's no way I'd put up with that in marriage. We'd be at each other's throats before our first anniversary." Something else was said, but finally Robin ran out and slammed the door behind her. Next chapter. After Robin left, I started spending more time with Marcy, and she naturally assumed it was because she was winning me back, and I didn't bother to dissuade her from that. She persisted in trying to prove to me that she was mine and mine alone, and by graduation she managed to convince me, and I did put the ring on her finger. We were married a month after graduation. The next 5 years flew by. We both excelled in our chosen fields and had the perfect marriage. It all came crashing down one Monday in June. I was scheduled to fly to Detroit for a contract negotiation and was already at the airport checking in when my boss called me on my cell phone and told me to change my flight to an evening flight because he had some last-minute instructions for me. He asked me to meet him at the Marriott for lunch, and we would discuss the change. I didn't call Marcy since she was already at work and knew I had already left and would be gone for 3 days. I was having lunch with Jack and discussing the recent changes he wanted me to bring up at the Detroit meeting when something caught my eye. The front desk was visible from where we were sitting, and I saw Marcy and a man I didn't know walk up to it. And a few minutes later, they walked away from the desk, headed for the elevators, and got on one of them. I apologized, walked up to the counter, and asked the front desk clerk what the name of the couple who had just checked in was. He started to say he couldn't do that when I showed him a $50 bill. "Will there be any trouble?" "Very likely, but not here and not today." He took the bill and handed me a registration card across the counter. Mr. and Mrs. William Sherman is what it said. I transcribed the information onto the card, thanked the receptionist, and went back to our lunch with Jack. When lunch was over and Jack finished his briefing, I looked at my watch and saw that I had 4 hours before I had to get back to the airport. I went into the hotel gift store and bought Robert Parker's latest novel, then settled down in the lobby to watch the elevators. I didn't have time to read most of the novel, as I had to look up every time I heard the zing as the elevator doors opened. 4 hours was almost up, and I was about to get up and leave my vigil when the elevator doors opened and Marcy and Sherman stepped out. I stood up and walked over to them. "Bill Sherman?" I asked, and held out my hand. He took it to shake it, and I said, "Gosh, Bill, it's been a long time since I saw you last. Is that Mrs. Sherman? She's settling in nicely. Lucky dog to have such a beautiful wife. Anyway, it's good to see you. I gotta run. I've got a plane to catch." And I was gone, leaving a deathly pale Marcy and a confused William Sherman. I didn't call Marcy when I got to Detroit to let her know where I was staying and how to reach me. The meetings in Detroit went well, and I flew home 3 days later. I flew in around 10:30 in the evening and checked into a hotel room. The next morning, I went into the office and informed Jack about the Detroit meetings and then took the day off. At 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I was in the office of Morrissey Investigations and spoke to Mr. William Miglio. I gave him everything I had on William Sherman and told him I wanted to know everything about this man. Where he worked, whether he was married or engaged, and any other information that might be relevant to the divorce case. After leaving there, I stopped at the back door, closed all of our accounts, and cleaned out the safe, then took everything to another bank and opened accounts in my name only. We have a guilt-free state, and eventually I'll have to settle up with Marcy, but I'd rather have the money for the divorce than let her have it, and hope I can get my share from her. Then I went home. Marcy hadn't gotten home from work yet, so I used that time to move all my stuff from the master bedroom to one of the spare bedrooms. I went and got a beer from the refrigerator and then went out and sat on the patio. It was a nice house and I loved the patio surrounded by flower beds, and I'm going to miss it. Unless I could get Marcy to agree to let me buy it out, which probably wouldn't be easy to do since she loved the place as much as I did. I was drinking a beer and admiring the sunset when Marcy came home. She walked out to the patio and sat down on one of the chaise lounges. You didn't call. There was no point. It wasn't what you thought. I don't want to talk about it, Marcy. Just sit with whatever you want to say until Tuesday. Why do I have to wait until Tuesday? Because I won't know what I'm going to do until Tuesday. I don't understand. You don't have to. We need to talk now, Rob. We can't let this drag on any longer than it already has. Tuesday, Marcy. No, Rob. Tuesday. I got up and went into the house. I hadn't unpacked my bag from the trip yet, so I picked it up and headed for the front door. Where are you going, Rob? I said Tuesday, but you won't let it go, so I'm going out and I'll be back Tuesday. I left the house and checked into a motel and spent the weekend lounging by the motel pool. Tuesday afternoon, I met with Mr. Melio and then headed home. Marcy had either taken the day off or left work early, as she was waiting for me when I pulled up in front of the house. I set my bag by the front door and then headed to the kitchen to get a beer. After opening it, I sat down at the kitchen table and waited for Marcy to come in and sit down at the table. When she sat down, I said, "Okay, Marcy, go ahead and say whatever you want. But first let me tell you what I know, so you don't waste a lot of time lying to me. I was having lunch with Jack when I saw you and your boyfriend checking into the hotel. You and the guy took the elevator up to the rooms, and I went over and talked to the receptionist, and he told me that you checked in as Mr. and Mrs. William Sherman. You went up in the elevator and came down 4 hours later. I didn't see anything resembling a board game on either you or your boyfriend, so I'm ruling out checkers, chess, Monopoly, or Scrabble. So tell me why I'm wrong in thinking you and Mr. Sherman had 4 hours of fun?" "It wasn't like that, Rob. He's not my boyfriend. I don't need a boyfriend, baby. I have you." "So tell me, Marcy, what did you do for 4 hours?" "It doesn't matter, Rob. I love you and you know I do. I prove it to you every day." "I'm waiting, Marcy." "It wasn't important, Rob. It had nothing to do with my love for you." "For the last time, Marcy, what did you do for 4 hours with your supposed husband? I'm going to get an answer or I'm out of here." "Nothing, Rob. It meant nothing." I started to get up. "I was just satisfying my curiosity, honey. It didn't mean anything." "Honest to God. You know I love you, and nothing will ever change that. You know it, Rob. You know it. If it was so pointless, why can't you tell me what you did?" She turned away from me and replied in a low voice, "I went with him to see if it was true." "And since you could do it in a minute and a half in a dark corner, the question remains, what were you doing for 4 hours?" "It was just curiosity, dear. As soon as I saw it, I just had to know what it felt like. He's not a boyfriend, and I don't have any feelings for him. It was just a one-time thing, and only because I was so curious." Then the whole story came out. Sherman worked alongside her and was apparently the office fencer. All the unmarried girls and even some of the married ones raved about him. I had to see him, Rob. I just had to. I just had to see it. And then, of course, you just had to try it on. She looked down at the floor and couldn't meet my gaze. "Did you even think that if he entertained every woman in your office, he also entertained every stupid bitch he could get his hands on? Have you even considered that if he's entertaining all the women, the odds that sooner or later some woman will give him something, and he in turn will pass it on to a dumb woman like you are very high? We've been through this curious shit before, Marcy, and I thought you'd learn a lesson from it, but I guess it's my own fault. I knew a cheater is always a cheater, and still, knowing that, I was stupid enough to take you back, and I guess you took that to mean that I'd take you back if you ever did it again. I have no one to blame but myself." "What are you going to do?" "It's not what I'm going to do. It's what you're going to do. I should kick your ass out, but I know you love me, so I'm going to give you one chance and one chance only. There are 2 things you have to do. Bastard is married, so you and I are going to call Mr. Sherman and the real Mrs. Sherman, and you're going to tell her what you did with her husband, and you're going to tell her about all the other women in your office." "I can't do that." "You're going to do it, or you're going to pack up and leave. And that's just the first thing. The second is that you will take a test for sexually transmitted diseases. If you pass the test, you can stay. If you don't pass, you're out of here." I refuse to be married to a woman stupid enough to risk my health just because she's curious. Can I? No, you can't. We're leaving here in 20 minutes to visit the Shermans. If you're not in the car when I'm ready to pull out of the driveway, it'll be because you're packing your stuff. Even if I go with you tonight, if I pick up something from Bill, are you going to leave me? You got it. Can't we wait until after the test? If I pick up something and I'm leaving anyway, why ruin Bill's marriage? I don't care about him, but why make his wife suffer? You still don't get it, do you? If he gave you something, he gave it to her too. And if he didn't give you anything, he'll eventually get something and give it to his wife. She should know. I looked at my watch. In the car in 10 minutes or start packing? The meeting with the Shermans didn't go too well. Mrs. Sherman was not at all happy to hear about Mr. Sherman socializing with the women he worked with. I didn't intervene when Mrs. Sherman slapped Marcy and grabbed Marcy's hair in a handful, and I smiled when Sherman tried to separate the ladies, and Mrs. Sherman kicked him in the balls with her knee. When he fell to the floor, I stood up and said, I see my work here is done. I headed for the door, and then Mrs. Sherman called out to me, Hey, did you forget something? I turned around just in time to see her kick Marcy's ass and send her stumbling back to me. Get that whore out of my house, she said, and then turned and kicked Mr. Bastard on the rocks with all her might. On the way home, Marcy was quiet, and as soon as we were in the house, she went straight to the bedroom. In the morning, Marcy asked me why I had not gone to bed, and I told her I would sleep in one of the spare bedrooms until further notice. I'm not going anywhere near you, Marcy. You're not touching me until you get a health certificate. Marcy did not get a health certificate. Mr. Bastard gifted her with syphilis, and no amount of begging, pleading, crying, and whining stopped the divorce. Next chapter. So I was 27. I was newly single and after 6 months without fun. That's how long the divorce had lasted, and I wouldn't have gambled while legally married or recovering from the gift Marcy had given me, and I was interested in finding someone. Fortunately, it turned out not to be that difficult. I had plenty of friends who were happy to set me up with someone who would take my mind off Marcy and our dead marriage. I was pretty good at it, and I rarely spent a weekend without an overnight guest. I did have a bit of a problem. I liked being married, and I knew I would want to get married again, but I was a bit of a hypocrite. If a girl I liked went to bed with me too easily, I would never consider marrying her. So, on the one hand, I pursued girls with the goal of getting them into my bed, and if I succeeded, they automatically dropped out. On the other hand, if I pursued them and didn't get results, they weren't considered either because I would dump them and go looking for someone I could get results with. It could have gone on like this indefinitely if a cup of coffee hadn't spilled on me. I was having breakfast at Patty Ann's cafe. I walked in, sat in a booth, and opened the morning paper. The hostess knew me and understood that I didn't need water or a menu, just coffee with cream. I was diving headfirst into the sports section when I heard an oh shit, and felt hot moisture hit my lap. I jumped out of the stall, grabbed some tissues, and started wiping myself off while listening. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I tripped on the carpet. I lifted my head and looked into the deepest blue eyes I had ever seen. They were on an angelic face, and a hurried glance showed that the figure complemented the face perfectly. Jessica, the landlady, hurried over with a damp towel and began to wipe things off, trying to lighten things up a bit by saying, "It seems you've met our new waitress." Meanwhile, the new girl was still going on, excuse me. That's okay, I said. I'll just have to go home and change before I can go to work, but I'll manage. Your breakfast is on me, the angel said, and Jessica replied, You need to snitch to your boss about that Rob guy. A panicked look appeared on the angel's face. No doubt he expected me to be fired if I complained to Angie. Jessica noticed that look and said, Not about you, Annie, but about the torn carpet. We'll never get it fixed until someone starts complaining. It's not the first time someone has tripped because of it. How about we tell Angie I tripped on it? That way I can keep you out of it. I saw the look of relief on her face and said, But there's a price to pay for that. The panic returned until I said, "Once we get to know each other a little better, you'll have to have dinner with me." Jessica replied, "Don't worry, honey. I've already gone out with him and he's a lot of fun." For the next 2 weeks, I made sure to sit in Annie's section whenever I ate at Patty Ann's. By the end of the 2 weeks, I felt we knew enough about each other, and one Friday morning I said, "I think it's time for me to pick up Annie." "Pick up what?" "It's time for you to have dinner with me." And here I was wondering if you'd ever get around to it. Is that a yes? A debt is a debt, and it must be paid. Besides being incredibly beautiful, she was smart, witty, and fun to be with. We had common tastes in music, books, movies, and sports. She didn't get into my bed right away, but I didn't care. I just liked being with her. We chatted like a couple of teenagers, and on the 6th date she said, "Enough of these stupid games. Take me to bed." She was insatiable. After that first time, every time we got together, the evening ended in her bed or mine. Sometimes I would go to her house to pick her up for a date, and we never left her side. Sometimes I would arrive, and she would open the door to greet me wearing only high-heel shoes. 6 months after our first date, I asked her to marry me, and she said yes. 4 days before the wedding, I threw a bachelor party, and the next night her friends invited her to their version of a bachelor party. The next night I rang her doorbell, and when she opened it, she handed me the ring and said, "I can't marry you, Rob. I've met someone else." She closed the door in my face, leaving me standing stunned. I banged on the door for almost 10 minutes, but she didn't answer. Finally, a guy from next door came out and told me to knock it off, or he would call the police for disturbing the peace. The next morning at the restaurant, Jessica told me that Annie had called and quit without notice. That same night, I returned to Annie's apartment and found that she had moved out. It was almost a month before I knew the whole story. The women went bar to bar the night of the dancers. The girls got Annie drunk, and sometime during the evening, Annie got up to go to the bathroom, and when half an hour had passed, a couple of the girls went looking for her. They found her in the back room. Annie couldn't look me in the eye after that, and so she ran off. I tried to find her, but no one could tell me where she had gone. I sent her several letters telling her I loved her and we could work things out, but I never heard back. Next chapter. For the next 4 years, I played the field and didn't allow myself to get too involved with any one woman. I suppose it was inevitable that I would meet one I wanted to have a long-term relationship with, and the gods, being creatures of perversion, made sure she wasn't that interested in me. I set out to change her mind. It took months, but I finally got her to agree to go out with me. I took Sheree to dinner and then to a play. She seemed to have a good time, and I asked her out on a second date. "I enjoyed the evening, Rob, but I don't think I want to waste your time and mine on something that isn't going anywhere." "How do you know that?" "How can you say it's going nowhere unless you spend some time exploring the possibilities?" "It's my feeling, Rob, and since my feelings are rarely wrong, I've learned to go with them." "You said rarely. This might be one of those times." I failed to change her mind, but I kept trying. It took 2 months before I got her to agree to a second date. We had a good time, and I was able to secure a third and then a fourth. Suddenly, we were making steady company, which in turn brought us to the bedroom where I discovered that Sheree and I were perfect for each other. In the bedroom, Sheree was not at all predictable. Every day with Sheree was different, and you never knew what kind of Sheree you were going to get. But you didn't care because everything was great. Things were going well for over a year, and then I asked Sheree to marry me and didn't get the reaction I was hoping for. "I wasn't quite ready for it," she said. "I was hoping I'd have a little more time, but it had to happen, so I guess now is as good a time as any." "I don't understand. The best time for what?" "To finish you off." "Finish? Why? What have I done?" "Besides asking me to marry you? Nothing. You're a very good and attentive lover, in fact, one of the best I've ever had. But a year is the longest I've ever spent with a man. You've already lasted longer than many others. To be honest, I've been looking for your replacement for about a month now." My replacement? I'm not a loner, Rob. I like variety too much to commit to one man. I've thought about it, but he has to be a man who will agree to an open marriage because I'll want variety anyway, and he has to be a man who can put up with my contempt and live with it. How can I respect a man who is willing to let anyone entertain me just to keep me? We've been good lovers, but it's time for me to move on. What the hell was wrong with me? I had no problem meeting girls and getting them into bed, and many of them I could keep, but I wasn't interested in them enough to do so. And the ones I wanted to keep, I couldn't. I fell into despondency when Sheree left, and was in the same "oh woe is me" mood when I got the news from Barton, Murray, and Weston. Next chapter. When you get as much money as Uncle James left me, big changes happen in your life. The first change was my job. I loved the work I was doing, but I absolutely hated the two dim bulbs that ran the place. Their father, who knew what he was doing, had died and left the business to his two idiot sons who had no clue about anything. So it went from being a place I enjoyed working to a place I would rather not set foot in. I started my own firm. I hired the best and brightest from the former firm, and when the dust cleared, I still had almost 2/3 of the former firm's clients. After my divorce from Marcy, I had to sell the house and I was living in a condominium, so the next step was to join a country club and buy a 6-bedroom house right on the golf course. I drove a 6-month-old Chevy 3/4-ton 4-wheel drive pickup that I was quite happy with, so there was no car change. With Uncle Jimmy's money, I was able to do things I had never done before, but had always wanted to. I started attending the symphony, going to screenings of new artists, bought a skybox, and season tickets to baseball and soccer games. I became involved in several charitable organizations and joined several committees, and I went back to school. When I was going to get my degree, money was tight, and I could only take classes that counted toward my degree. Now that I had money, I was going to take classes I had always wanted to take but couldn't afford. The only thing was that I didn't tell anyone about my sudden adventuring. By the time Uncle Jimmy blessed me, I had developed a very cynical attitude toward women, and the last thing I needed or wanted was a bunch of gold diggers deciding they loved me and wanted to be mine forever. Or until they dumped me like everyone else, with the added bonus of easing my bank balance. But I still wanted female companionship from time to time, and not just as a bed partner. So how to make that happen? I was still pondering this topic when one of the charitable organizations I was involved with was holding a fundraiser. They invited a well-known author who was going to give a talk and hand out several signed first editions of his latest works. The dinner was $200 a plate, with all proceeds going to charity, and it was one of those events you don't go to without a date. After breaking up with Sheree, I hadn't gotten back into the dating scene yet, so I didn't know anyone to invite. Mike Devins, who was on the committee with me, asked what time I was planning on coming, and I told him I wasn't coming. He asked why, and I said, "There is no date, and I really don't know anyone I could ask on such short notice." "No problem," he said, reached into his wallet, pulled out a card, and held it out to me. I read the card. Premier Escorts. I don't want a prostitute. Not all escorts are prostitutes. In fact, most of those who work for reputable agencies are not. I've used Premier a dozen times without any problems. What the hell have I got to lose? I put the card in my pocket and called Premier the next day to make an appointment for the afternoon. It turned out to be nothing like I expected. I had to fill out a questionnaire, provide personal and business references, and fill out a questionnaire about myself. Then, I was seated in a booth with a computer screen and a pencil pad and shown a video presentation about available women. I guessed that while I was watching the presentation, the woman interviewing me was on the phone and checking my references. I wrote down 3 names on a notepad, and when the presentation was over, I handed the names to the interviewer, who I would have chosen had she been at the presentation, and she went into her computer. After a minute or two, she said, "Melissa and Karen are already booked for this evening, but Ellen is available." Then I guess Ellen will be fine then. We agreed on a fee, and I was told I could pick Ellen up from the agency or have her meet me elsewhere. We never allow our girls to be picked up where they live. I told her that the agency was fine with me and that I would pick Ellen up at 6 o'clock on Friday. The pictures of Ellen in the presentation video did not convey her virtues. She was stunning in a black cocktail dress and heeled shoes. According to the bio in the presentation, she was 23 years old, but she looked 18 to 19. She looked like something between a girl next door and a cheerleader. I was going to get a lot of attention with this hottie on my arm. It would be a case of, I know what he saw in her, but what she could do to him. I was 13 years older than Ellen, but I played sports and I thought I looked 5 years younger than I was. As long as no one but Mike knew she was an escort, I was going to be the subject of much speculation. The evening went well. Ellen proved to be intelligent and a very good conversationalist. She was also on top of her game. On the way to dinner, she asked me if those in attendance knew I had brought an escort, and I said no. Then she asked if I wanted them to know. I thought for a moment and answered no. Then we need to be prepared for the inevitable questions. How long have we been dating? Where did we meet and the like? We came up with a plausible story, and it was a good thing, because not 5 minutes later, Betsy Newman asked that very question, and Ellen said, I drove into his truck in the parking lot at the library and left a note with my name and phone number under his windshield wiper. He called me, and one thing led to another, and here we are. I smiled and said, the luckiest accident I've ever been in. When we arrived, we were each given a ticket for the drawing that would determine who would receive the signed first editions that were being given away, and my number was called. On the way to the event, Ellen and I discussed dinner and circumstances, and I learned that the author was one of her favorites, so I took Ellen's ticket, gave her mine, and sent her off to get the book. The author did a gift inscription, and Ellen thanked me and asked why I didn't want the book for myself. I lied and said that as a committee member, I didn't feel it was appropriate to take the book. The truth was that I had read 2 of his other books and didn't like either of them. After dinner, I asked Ellen if she would like to stop somewhere and have a drink or two with me, and she agreed. I expected her to agree, as we both knew she had another 2 hours to spend at my disposal. We walked into Sardi's, and when Giselle came over to take our order, Ellen asked for a Cosmo, and I asked for my usual. My usual drink looked like a vodka tonic with a lime slice, but it was actually a glass of water with a lime slice. I was in the habit of not drinking and driving, but I found that just ordering a Coke when everyone else was drinking made some people feel uncomfortable. Like they thought there was something wrong with me if I didn't drink. As soon as the drinks arrived, I started asking Ellen about working as an escort. Not questions like, what does a nice girl like you do? But questions about what an escort might do. She was slow to answer, and I thought that maybe she thought I was trying to find out from her if she was playing for money, so I thought I'd better explain. I want to find out if a long-term relationship is possible. I mean, can I arrange to have the same escort all the time, or do I have to rely on luck every time I go to an agency for a date? It depends. On what? Let's say you need a girl for every Thursday or every Saturday. Yes, you could secure her for that time, or at least you could while she was working there. But if you called on Tuesday and asked for a specific girl for Thursday, it would depend on whether she was already booked for that night. Why do you ask? Because I see the need to use an escort on a regular basis, and having different women show up every time I attend an event would make me look a little unstable, and that's an impression I don't want to give. How far in advance do you usually know you need someone? Usually a week or 2 in advance, but sometimes only a day or 2 in advance. A week will probably give you enough time to be sure you get the woman you want, but a day or 2 would be questionable. Can I ask a woman out at the end of a date and have her report it to an agency, or do I always need to go to an agency? You need to go to an agency because she may already be scheduled for something else and not know it yet. We talked some more, and then I drove her back to the agency so she could pick up her car. Next chapter. My life fell into a familiar rut. Working, taking night classes in college for subjects I wanted to take when I got my degree but couldn't, and attending events organized by the committees I was on. I went on dates now and then, but never found anyone I was interested in. I did, however, have a life of sorts. A friend set me up with a very upscale call girl, and once a week for 1500 I could fulfill my needs. Tasha was so good that one day, I even offered to be her full-time mistress, but she declined. She was still that Marcy, but at least she was honest about it. I'm curious, and would have to give it up if I were to settle down with one man. I called the agency several times to ask for Ellen, and always had a good time when she was with me. Twice she was gone, and one time I got Melissa, and the other time I got Karen, and although they weren't bad, I didn't have as much fun with them as I did with Ellen. I thought of Ellen often. She seemed everything a man would want to see in a woman, and I couldn't understand why she wasn't engaged or married. Or maybe she was, but didn't wear a ring. But that seemed unlikely to me. Even though we spent a lot of time together, it wasn't the kind of relationship that allowed me to ask her about her personal life. Then, I started having problems with escorts. 4 times I needed an escort, and Ellen wasn't available. The ones I was seeing were fulfilling their purpose, but I wasn't too pleased. Next chapter. The fall semester was upon us, and one of the classes I wanted to take was only held on Monday and Thursday afternoons. One of the perks of being a boss was that I could give myself time off work during the day, so I signed up for the class. On the second day of class, I arrived on campus early and decided to go to the cafeteria in the student union to eat pie and drink coffee. After paying the cashier, I looked around the room for a place to sit down and saw Ellen sitting alone at a table with her nose buried in a book. She looked up irritably when someone uninvited sat down in the chair across from her, and when she saw it was me, she smiled and said, "What are you doing here?" "No, I'm a little early for my 2 o'clock, so I came here and saw you here, so I came to join you. I can leave if I'm disturbing you." No, I was just reading what Professor Reynolds was going to talk about today. I didn't realize you were studying here. Then we have something in common, because I didn't know you were a student either. We got to talking, and I learned that she's getting her degree in business management, has been working on it for 3 years, and hopes to finish it in 3 more. What's taking so long? Money and time. I need to keep my days free for classes, so I have to work nights. But I can't work nights full-time because I need time to study, work on term papers and such. Escorts pay pretty good if you work, but I have a hard time trying to carve out funds for living and studying out of what I earn. Sometimes I can only afford 1 or 2 classes a semester, and that's why it takes me so long. What do you mean it pays pretty well sometimes? You have to go out to make money. Some weeks are good and I get called out for 3 or 4 nights, and some weeks I only get called out for 1 night. There have even been weeks when no one calls me at all, so you have to watch your budget carefully. I looked at the clock and saw that it was time to head to class. I told Ellen I'd talk to her later, got up, and headed to class. On the way home, an idea occurred to me, and by the time I got to work the next morning, it had grown. I called Premier and asked to schedule Ellen for Tuesday of the following week. I was told she was free that day, and I asked them to tell her to dress as usual. Jeans would do just fine, and meet me at the Texas Steakhouse on Bromley Lane. I was already sitting in a booth when Ellen arrived, and when she sat down, she asked what we were going to do, and I said we were having a business meeting. A business meeting? In jeans? And why would you want me in a business meeting? You're studying business, right? And you have specific knowledge that will be useful for the discussion. What knowledge? Your knowledge of the escort service business? I don't understand. It will all become clear at the meeting, but for now, enjoy dinner. Over dinner, we talked about school. I told her why I was taking classes, and she replied that she understood where I was coming from. She had classes she would have loved to take, but they wouldn't help her get her degree. At dinner, we had some Bailey's Irish cream, and then I said, "Okay, time to talk business." "Where's the meeting?" "Right here." I don't understand. On our first date, I told you how important it was to me to have the same woman as my escort when I needed her. Sometimes I've been able to do that, but there have been a few times when I've called the agency and you weren't there. Last Thursday in the cafeteria, you told me about how unpredictable the escort business is in terms of employment and how you have to keep a tight budget so that the good weeks make up for the bad ones. I thought about it and decided to make you an offer. Wow. I don't think I want to go there. You haven't heard the proposal yet, so don't jump to conclusions. During our dates, I never once even hinted at doing what just flashed through your head. It's not that I haven't thought about it. Here's the thing. I want the same woman with me when I attend social events, and I don't want to play hit or miss when I call an agency. I want to hire you as a full-time escort. I will hire you through my company, so as a full-time employee, you will be eligible for most benefits such as health insurance, paid vacation, 401k, sick leave, and the like. You will also get some of the paid holidays, but not necessarily all of them because some of them you will have to be with me at an event. Does that sound like something you might be interested in? Sounds intriguing, at least as far as the benefits are concerned. But what about the salary? How much did you make last year? Well, that's the stumbling block. Why? There's what the premier paid me and what I earned under the table. It's my turn not to want to go there. Just tell me the total amount you earned last year. My premier income was just over $39,000. And the under the table you mentioned? I'll be honest with you, Rob, and I hope it doesn't change your opinion of me too much. But I earned another 30 doing additional personal services. Additional personal services? Some clients wanted a little more than just hanging on your arm for the evening. It took a second before her words reached consciousness. Oh, God. How come I never knew about this? Because I only do it if the client asks, and even then, not always. I never give information voluntarily. I stared at her for a few seconds, then said, That doesn't change anything. The offer still stands. All we have to do is discuss the details. Are you willing to pay me $70,000 a year just to be your regular sweetie? No. I'm willing to pay you $40,000 and work with you as my personal assistant. I appreciate your offer, Rob, but I can't do that. Why not? Money. Barring income from under the table, which isn't all that reliable because it depends on which client asks for it, and many clients like you never ask for it, my after-tax income was only $29,500. When I run out to pay rent, utilities, car, insurance, groceries, and keep myself in the clothes I need for the work I do, I'm out the door. My income is what I pay for school with, and like I just said, it's not that reliable. I hear you'd consider it if the money was better. Of course I would consider it. It would give my life some structure. I wouldn't wait for a call to say I have a job for this night or the next, and knowing I have a steady paycheck would be a relief. But what you're offering doesn't suit me. Without an escort, I wouldn't have the opportunities to work under the table. And this money is what pays for my tuition, and getting a degree is what will lead me to a decent job where I can prove myself, climb the corporate ladder, and eventually land a position that pays a decent to very good salary. I looked at her, mulling over her words, and then said, 40 is the maximum I can go for without resorting to awkward explanations, but there are other possibilities. How much do you appreciate the privacy that living alone gives you? What kind of question is that? I need to know if you'd be willing to give up some of it if circumstances worked out well. I don't know. I'm going to lay it out now and I want you to think about it for a while. I have a 6-bedroom house in Regency Park. One of the bedrooms I've turned into a home office and den. You can take one of the other bedrooms and I'll convert the one next door into an office for you. This will save you the expense of rent and utilities. I will provide you with a company car and a company credit card to pay for gasoline, and you can sell your car. This will save you from car payments and insurance costs. As for school, I will take care of the tuition and textbooks. Since I'll have you on my arm most of the time in the evenings, you'll have practically the whole day to go to class, which means you'll be able to take a full load, not just a couple of classes a semester. Think about it. I'll call the agency and set up an appointment for Saturday night, and we can talk more about it. I could see she had a lot of questions piling up, but I didn't want to answer them until she had time to think hard about my offer. As I drove away from the steakhouse, I asked myself if I knew what I was doing, and I had to honestly admit that I didn't. Did it make the slightest bit of sense? I used an escort maybe 4 times a month at an average cost of about $400. That amounted to $1,600 a month or $19,200 a year. Why was I offering 2.5 times that amount just to be guaranteed to get the same girl every time I needed her? I was single. So what if I got a different woman every time I went somewhere? Then I figured I'd have to come up with some reasonable explanation for the people at work if I did take her to work. I fell asleep, still wondering why I did what I did. By the time I met with Ellen on Saturday, I had thought the idea to death, and the best I could come up with was that I really liked being with Ellen. And I liked being seen with her because she was drop-dead gorgeous, and having a drop-dead gorgeous woman hanging on to me didn't hurt my reputation one bit. As for the financial justification? Screw that. I could afford it, and I didn't have to justify it to anyone. And there was one other thing. Another very important thing. I didn't admit it to myself right away, especially after everything I'd been through. But I wanted Ellen. I wanted her. But I knew I couldn't have her, at least not in the way I wanted her. She would never be interested in someone my age, and while I couldn't possess her, I could have her around. In a way, I could have had her because she told me herself that she did extra favors for some clients, but I didn't want to go for it. It would have changed the relationship in a way that I wouldn't have liked, so I would have stayed with Tasha to fulfill my needs in that area. Next chapter. So, what do you think of my proposal? I asked Ellen at a table in the restaurant. I like it because it will allow me to focus on my studies, but I have some reservations. And what are they? Two very serious ones. One, I turn down the apartment, say goodbye to the agency, and then a month later you change your mind. No apartment, no job, a full load of school that I'll have to. Drop out of to use that time to find a job. Next is the issue of personal life. I don't have a boyfriend right now, but if and when I do, how will we feel about me bringing him home? The thought of Ellen having a boyfriend didn't make me happy at all, but I had to expect that it might come up at some point. I just had to get the thought out of my head. To allay your fears, I will enter into a legally enforceable contract with you that has an extension clause and financial penalties for early termination. I'll make it for 2 years. This will give you enough time to finish school and then figure out what you want to do with your degree. With a full load, you will probably finish school in a year or a year and a half, and 2 years will give you some leeway. At the end of the 2 years, we can discuss resuming your degree. As for your second question, I don't see a problem. The company has an account at Best Western, and I will put your name on the list of people who are allowed to use that account. If you don't feel comfortable taking it home with you, you can use Best Western. What else? What should I tell my mom? That's up to you. Tell her whatever you want. Just let me know so that if it comes down to it, I can support you. Maybe tell her I hired you to house sit because I'm traveling a lot on business. By the end of the evening, she decided to do just that, and on Monday, she filed a notice with the agency and informed her landlord that she would not be renewing at the end of the month. 2 weeks later, on a Wednesday, I helped her move her belongings into a house in Regency Park. Next chapter. Thursday morning, I had to question whether I was in my right mind in making the deal with Ellen. I got up at my usual 5 o'clock in the morning to do my morning workout on the equipment I had set up in the basement. When I got there, I found that Ellen was already up and working out on the Stairmaster machine. What really got to me was when I told her I was a member of the country club and put her name on the list as a member of my family. She came out of her room one Saturday around noon and told me she was going to go to the club, lay by the pool, and bask in the sun. In that? Sure. Anything wrong with that? Only that you'll give some of those old farts a heart attack. I hope nobody drowns, because the lifeguards won't pay attention to anything but you. You say the nicest things. Next chapter. 2 months passed and I used Ellen an average of twice a week and usually took her out to dinner on Saturday or Sunday. She seemed to be very comfortable and there was no awkwardness in the house. She gave me a lot of wood, but I managed to keep it from her, although I did increase my visits to Tasha. The only problem I ran into was with my accountant, who told me that I couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do what I was doing through the company's books. I finally had to tell him to do it, and then do whatever I needed to do to make it legal. If I have to pay extra taxes or whatever, just do it. What the hell? I yelled to him. It's my damn money, and I'll do whatever I want with it. One night at a fundraiser, Monica Coyce was talking to Ellen and me, and out of the blue she said, "When are you going to put the ring on her finger, Rob?" Ellen laughed and replied, "He's afraid to ask me. He thinks he's too old for me." "Really?" asked Monica. "Not at all. You'd better go, Rob, before she leaves." When Monica stepped back, Ellen said, "We spend a lot of time together at these events. Maybe for appearance's sake, we should get me a ring to wear when we attend one of them." Where did that "he thinks he's too old for me" thing come from? Isn't I needed to say something, and that was the first thing that came to mind. Just in case you were wondering, you're not like the others. I'm not? Like I told Monica, no way. The next day was Saturday, and I took Ellen to the jewelry store to pick out a ring. She picked out a small, inexpensive engagement ring, and I told her no. If we're going to do this, we need to take it seriously. Pick something with at least half a carat in weight. Are you sure? I can't have anyone thinking I'm stingy when it comes to my lady. Ellen chose a half-carat solitaire in a platinum setting. It was just the right size for her finger, and we left the store wearing it. We stopped for lunch, and when we had finished eating and had a cup of coffee after our meal, Ellen asked, "Can I get a little personal?" I guess so. Why do we do what we do? I don't understand our relationship at all. You seem like the perfect prey for some lucky girl. Why do you need me? Why isn't that ring on the finger of a real bride? So what's going on here, Rob? I stared at her for a few seconds, trying to come up with a reasonable lie, but then I decided to hell with it and told her the truth. I've found myself in a position where I need a woman for the role you fulfill, and I'm the kind of guy who needs female companionship, but I don't trust women anymore. I told her about everything from Marcy to Sheree, and then I said, I just can't let that happen to me again, so I've decided that what's best for me is what we're doing now. Then the next question is why you didn't move on. I told you when you first brought up the idea that I sometimes provide extras. Why didn't you take advantage of that? I explained my thoughts to her, and she looked at me like I had two heads. I know you have desires, Rob. I've seen your pants, and I can't believe a big man like you would settle for nothing more than manual stimulation. No, I said, and then told her about my weekly visits to Tasha. And you plan to live like this for the rest of your life? I shrugged and called to get the check. She was quiet on the way home, and when we arrived, she left in her car to go shopping. When she came back, she made dinner, we ate lunch, and then she retired to her room to work on a term paper that was due the following week. I watched a couple hours of TV and then went to bed. When I woke up in the morning, I was alone in bed. I got up, took a shower, and headed to the kitchen to make some coffee. When I walked into the kitchen, I found Ellen there making breakfast. She walked over to me and kissed me. If you're stupid enough to say no, I'll respect your wishes. Otherwise, get used to me being your bed buddy. Why? Why did you do it, and why do you want to keep doing it? Several reasons. One is that I'm a healthy woman, and between studying and what I'm doing with you, I haven't had time to find a boyfriend. I've always waited for a client to ask me out myself. You have no idea how hard it was for me to stick to that rule with you. I kept waiting for you to say something, but you never did. When you asked me to live together, I was sure we'd end up in your bed the first night I was here. But we didn't. And yesterday I found out why. So I decided that if you didn't want to make a move, I should. Last night I took the bull by the horns, and here we are. That night, Ellen moved from her bedroom to mine. Next chapter. For the next 6 months, Ellen and I lived pretty much as husband and wife. At events, people would notice the engagement ring and the when's the wedding. Questions would start. Ellen would answer that it wouldn't be until she got her degree, and the thought of her actually getting that degree terrified me. Once she got it, I would lose her. The one thing I never did was lie to myself, so I had to face the facts. I loved her. I loved her and I didn't want to lose her, but at the same time I was afraid to make a commitment. I still had a distrust of women, even though something inside me was screaming, Ellen is different. Ellen is different. And the fact that Ellen had never viewed our relationship as anything other than a business arrangement with friends with benefits. But my fear of losing her was stronger than all my other fears, and I made up my mind. It was at a fundraiser for the Salvation Army, and Ellen and I were talking to Horace Briscoe when Gail Briscoe approached us. Have you made a date yet? She asked. Before Ellen could give her standard answer, I said, she's graduating in May, so we're planning a June wedding. I don't know yet if it will be the first week or the second, so I'm keeping both options on the table. I plan to send out the invitations the first week of May. Ellen stared at me stunned while Horace and Gail said they wouldn't miss the event for anything, then turned and went to talk to Stan Whitman. Ellen looked at me with an expression I couldn't read and then said, I think I missed something. I think I forgot the conversation in which we set the wedding date. And I missed something else too. Was I asleep when you asked me to marry you? I guess you were. You're wearing a wedding ring, and I couldn't have put it on you if you hadn't said yes. Are you serious? Yes, seriously. Why 180? I remember you telling me you didn't trust women and would never put yourself in a position to get hurt again. That was before you. It dawned on me that if I didn't make a move, you'd graduate, get a new degree, and move on with your life. I don't think I could have endured coming home if you weren't there. I couldn't work up the courage to ask you directly, so I ambushed you tonight. Don't you think maybe you should have talked to me before telling Horace and Gail what you told them? What if I had said, no, we won't? Why would you do that? You're the one who told everyone we'd set a date as soon as you got your diploma. Now, the diploma is right around the corner. You're sidestepping the question, Rob. What if I don't want to marry you? Then I guess you won't want to. What makes you think I'll marry you? You seemed happy living with me and sharing a bed with me, so why wouldn't I think you'd marry me? What we've been doing is not the same as being married. Of course it is. We do everything together. We do everything for each other. In terms of intimacy, we're a hell of a match. We do everything married couples do. Jesus, Ellen, we even go grocery shopping together, so don't tell me what we do isn't the same as being married. I love what we do and I want to keep doing it. That means I have to marry you before you can leave. This isn't the place for that kind of talk right now, Rob. We'll talk about it when we get home. The ride home passed in silence as Ellen stared out the passenger side window. When we pulled up to the house, she walked into the living room and sat down on the couch. As soon as I sat down, Ellen said, I don't want to marry Rob. She paused for a moment and then said, No, that's wrong. I don't want to get married now. I was looking forward to getting my degree so I could have a life. So that I could have a real job and live a normal life, not a life centered around men. To wake up in the morning and not have to think about having to go to a cocktail party with some slug who may have been vetted by an agency but has bad breath or body odor. Walking home from work knowing that I can just relax and not have to dress up and do beauty makeovers for a man I've never seen and probably never will again. What I was looking forward to, Rob, was a man-free existence. I don't mind men, Rob. I just need a break from them. For the last 4 years, my life has revolved around men. 2, 3, or 5 different men every week. Dates I couldn't say no to because I needed the money. I need time to myself, Rob. I need time to myself, time where I don't have to make time for anyone but myself. I sat and listened to her, understanding what she was talking about, but understanding it didn't ease the pain I was starting to feel. Another woman I wanted, but who didn't want me. It didn't help that I'd done this to myself either. I vowed that I would never let another woman run her claws deep enough into me to hurt. That was why I'd gone the escort route. It was my own damn fault. Ellen realized the look on my face and quickly said, It's not your fault, Rob. I'm just not ready. It tickles me to death that you want me enough to want to marry me. But I'm just not ready. I didn't have anything to say to that, so I just shrugged, got up, and left the room. I decided to take a shower before I went to bed. Later, Ellen came up to me and the outcome was predictable. Nothing has changed, Bobby, she said. Afterward, lying on the bed and looking up at the ceiling, I thought about her comment. Of course things had changed. She would be gone. In some ways, it would be even worse than it had been with Marcy, Annie, and Sheree. With those three, it happened quickly. Boom, boom, and it was over if you didn't count the pain. And with Ellen, I had to wait 7 months for the end. 7 months until it ate away at me, and then God only knows how long it took me to come to my senses after she was gone. I wasn't strong enough. I couldn't do it. I couldn't survive the next 7 months. The next morning, when we sat down to breakfast, I asked her if she had any idea where she wanted to live when she got out on her own. I haven't given it much thought. I still have some time before that happens. Why? I thought we could use this weekend to look at apartments. She looked at me for a few seconds, then said, It doesn't have to be that way, Bobby. No, it has to be this way, Ellen. When you graduate, it will be over, and I just can't, suffer for 7 months knowing what's in store for me. It's better to take a break now so I can start trying to deal with it. My contract with you remains unchanged, but instead of living here, you will live in your own apartment. I'll take care of the first year's rent and utilities, and nothing else will change. She set her fork aside and said, Fine, if that's the way you want it. She stood up, shook the plate down the garbage disposal, put it in the dishwasher, and left the room without another word. Next chapter. Ellen stayed in her room that night, and at breakfast on Saturday, she handed me a list of apartments she wanted to see. She said the 4th apartment we were looking at would suit her, and she drew up the paperwork. She signed a 1-year lease, and I wrote a check for the first year and the security deposit. I think we exchanged no more than 75 words between the time she sat down at the breakfast table and the signing of the lease, and the ride home was spent in silence. As soon as we got home, I handed her a credit card and said, You'll need furniture, pots and pans, curtains, and everything else. Buy what you think you'll need. What's my limit? Take whatever you want or think you'll need. Unless you buy gilded furniture, you can't use this card to the max. She looked at me with an unreadable expression and then turned and left the room. I heard her leave the house about a half hour later. She hadn't returned by the time I went to bed, and I woke up alone in the morning. I knew she was home because I could hear the shower running in the bathroom down the hall. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard the garage door open and then close, and I realized she was gone again. And then I called a couple guys I knew and drove to the country club and played 18 holes and then had a long lunch with them. When I got home, I found my credit card on the kitchen table, and on it was the engagement ring I'd bought for Ellen. She didn't come home that night, and she was gone when I got home from work the next day. When she didn't come home Monday night, I checked her room and found that all of her belongings were gone. I called her cell phone, and when she answered, I said, Hi, where have you been? You wanted me to leave, so I left. What nights will you need me this week? Each one is something I wanted to say, but didn't. I don't have any plans this week. I'm not going to put my phone down, so when you need me, call me on my cell phone. I said, okay, bye, and hung up. I got what I wanted. She was out of the house, and I wouldn't have to agonize over being around her for the next 7 months. And it was killing me. A week passed, and I started to get used to waking up and Ellen not being around. Not that she wasn't around, but that I was alone in the mornings. Monday, I got to class early, had pie and coffee in the cafeteria, and saw Ellen and some guy walk in together, went through the line. And as Ellen walked up to the cash register, I saw that she noticed me. But after she paid, she went to a table at the other end of the hall and sat down with the guy she came in with. I finished my coffee and headed to class. Tuesday afternoon, I got a call from Stu Miller inviting me to a cocktail party on Friday night, and I told him I'd be there. I reached for the phone to call Ellen, but at the last second decided not to. I called Premier and found out that Melissa was available and arranged to meet her. Several people at the party were surprised to see me with Melissa instead of Ellen. Horace and Gail were there, and I could see that it was all Gail could do not to come over and ask where Ellen was. That was probably a good thing, since I had no idea what I could say to her. Next chapter. I tried to find something to do for the weekend, but no matter what I did or wherever I went in the house, I saw something that reminded me of Ellen. Well, I went through it with the rest of them, and I somehow managed to survive, and eventually I'll put that behind me as well. Going to class on Monday, I tried to stay out of the cafeteria to avoid any chance of seeing Ellen. I had a few important projects at work that I could burrow into, and it helped me not think about Ellen. On Wednesday, I needed an escort, so I called Premier again. My companion that evening was a very attractive brunette. Tracy was everything you could want for a date. She hung on my arm and acted like a woman determined to fend off any other woman who might have views on her man. Horace wasn't at the affair, but Gail was, and I could see that curiosity was eating her alive. By Thursday, I felt the need and called Tasha to see if she was available. She was free and I took her out to dinner and a show, and in the evening she asked me where I was spending my time since she hadn't seen me in a while. I always managed to talk to Tasha. It was one of the reasons I tried to make her my mistress. And I told her about Ellen, how she came to be and how it ended. Tasha sympathized and then said she'd take my mind off Ellen for a little while. But she didn't. No matter what Tasha did, and there was nothing wrong with it, I thought, Ellen did it wrong. Or, Ellen could have. As I was about to leave, Tasha said, I like seeing you, Rob, and I'm in no hurry to drive you away. But if your feelings for this girl are as strong as you say they are, you need to do something about it. You have to find a way to stay in touch and be a friend. You have to show her that you care, but are also willing to respect her wishes. I can understand her side of it, Rob. I understand that she needs a break from men. I've thought about it a couple times myself. She seems to care about you, but she's not ready to settle down yet. Give her some space, Rob. Stay in touch, be a friend, but give her some space. I'm not sure if I'm putting it right. It's just something I heard somewhere, but it's something like, if you love something, set it free. If it comes back to you, then it was always yours. If it doesn't, then it was never yours. Next chapter. Friday night was the Arts Council meeting, and I was curious how it would go, since Gail was also on the council. Of course, when the meeting was over, Gail clung to me and asked to have coffee with her. I couldn't be impolite, so I agreed. I knew this was coming, so when she asked where Ellen had been lately, I already had a story ready. I shrugged and said, She said she needed to be alone. I haven't talked to her in 3 weeks. Why on earth would she do that? I think she changed her mind about getting married. I just have a feeling. But it wasn't until after we started making plans for the wedding that she started needing space. It was Gail's turn to shrug, and she said, I can understand that. As my wedding approached, I had a lot of nervousness. More than once I wanted to run away to the mountains. Hang in there, Rob. It's going to work out. Saturday morning I overslept and didn't get out of bed until 9. I was sitting at the kitchen table drinking coffee and reading the sports section of the daily paper when the phone rang. I picked up the cordless handset from the table and answered it. Hello? Good morning, Rob. Good morning, Ellen. It's nice to hear your voice. You might have heard it sooner if you'd called. The phone works both ways, Ellen, as you made sure of this morning. That's an odd thing to say. Really? I assumed you didn't want to talk to me, so why did I have to call? That's ridiculous, Rob. Why wouldn't I want to talk to you? I can only point to the fact that you didn't call for 2 weeks, didn't try to talk to me when you moved. I had to call you to find out where you were. And then there was that day in the cafeteria when you went and sat at the other end of the hall, avoiding me. To me, all that said was that you didn't want to talk to me. Hence, I didn't make the call. Is that why you used an agency instead of calling me? In part. I told you that nothing has changed except our living conditions. I fully expect to be your partner when you need one. There's no need to call an agency. I know, Ellen, but once you left, and the reason for your departure was explained to me, I decided it was best for me to get it over with. It doesn't have to be that way, Rob. I think it has to be that way for my well-being. I'm sorry, Ellen. I need to get something straight, Rob. That day in the cafeteria is not an insult or my unwillingness to talk to you. Paul is part of our group of 5 who are working on a project for the business strategies course, and we came to the cafeteria to have coffee and discuss our part of the project. Paul chose the table we were sitting at over me. And to be honest, Rob, I wasn't sure you wanted to talk to me. You seemed to be in a hurry to find me a place to stay to get me away from you. Come on, Ellen, you know why I did that. I explained it to you before we even went apartment hunting. Yes, Rob, and I didn't realize it then any more than I do now. All I said was that I didn't want to get married right away and that I needed time to live a normal life without men. I never said I didn't care about you, nor did I say you would completely disappear from my life. I told you what I wanted to do and why. Remember what you told me about how you felt after Sheree? You wanted nothing to do with women. That's how I feel about my career as an escort. I want to take my mind off men for a while. That's all. For a while, not forever. I understand, Ellen. But that doesn't make me feel any better. It's not your fault, Ellen. It's all on me. I'm the one who let myself fall in love with you. I'm the one who chose to use an escort instead of dating and maybe finding another woman who would be attracted to me and then eventually fall in love with me. I'm the one who picked you out of everyone else in the agency's presentation video. I did that to Ellen myself. Take care of yourself, Ellen. Have a happy life. Bye. I hung up the phone, and after a few seconds I started feeling sorry for myself again. By noon, I was angry at myself for letting this overwhelm me when I had the ways and means to do something about it. Next chapter. What's the point of having a lot of money if you don't use it? It only took 4 phone calls. One to Tasha to see if she was free for the week. One to Bill Perkins to let him know he's in charge of the company for the week. One to the charter company at the airport, and one to the hotel in Cabo San Lucas. At 6 o'clock that evening, Tasha and I were sipping champagne at 20,000 feet in the Learplane that was taking us to spend Thanksgiving week on the beach and in the sun. Days were filled with snorkeling, sailing, paragliding, and lying on the beach in the sunshine. Nights, Tasha did her best to thank me for my paid vacation. I can honestly say that I didn't think about Ellen once until the Learplane's landing gear failed on the approach when we were coming home. And that was only because that's when Tasha asked, "What did you do when it came to Ellen?" "I took your advice, honey. I set her free." She patted my hand and didn't say another word. As I walked her to the door, she kissed, opening the door, said, "If you ever decide to settle down with one man, don't forget about me, okay? You'll be number 1 on Rob's list, I promise." The next few weeks flew by, and for the only event I attended, I went alone. I decided that as long as Tasha was free, I could do without women in my life. That's not to say that there weren't women who wanted to be in my life, but I just didn't want the hassle anymore. Why put so much time and effort into creating a relationship only to mess it up later? The 3rd week of December, we had a Christmas party. I rented one of the ballrooms at the Hilton, booked a live band, and organized the catering. Some girls from the office asked me if they could decorate the room, and I gave them a credit card and told them to get on it. They hung streamers and boughs everywhere and put a Christmas tree with presents in the corner. Mona, my secretary, organized a secret Santa gift exchange with a $10 limit, and I chose Carol's name. I bought her a CD of her favorite singer, and even though it cost more than $10, I didn't think anyone would care. We had dinner, and then I gave a short speech and thanked everyone for helping to make this a great year for the company, and then surprised everyone by handing out bonus checks that no one expected. Mona then got busy handing out gifts under the Christmas tree, and when she called my name, I walked over and she handed me a small box. Returning to my seat, I opened it. On the cotton pad was a key card with a sticky note on it that read, "Room 412." I quickly looked around the room, but no one was paying attention to me. I put the card in my pocket and wondered who or what was waiting for me in room 412, but that would have to wait since I couldn't leave my own party. The band began to tune in, and I was in for the next surprise. All the women in the room stood up, walked over to my table, and lined up. Mona stood at the head of the line and asked me to stand up. A little confused, I complied with her request, and she came over and kissed me. "Merry Christmas, boss," she said, moving out of the way and allowing Sheree from accounting to stand in front of me and kiss me. She also wished me a Merry Christmas, then stepped aside and let Allison stand in front of me. Allison was one of the girls who asked me to let them do the decorating. She laughed when she saw the look on my face and pointed upwards. I looked up and saw that I was standing under a large mistletoe bush. Mona and Sheree were married, and Allison was single. As she stepped away, I wondered if I would find her in room 412. And that thought faded away as the other women took their seats. Last in line was Betty, one of my soil engineers. She was married, but came to the party without her husband. By the time she approached me, the band had already started playing. People were on the dance floor, and no one was paying attention when Betty kissed me. She gave me a sly smile and said, "See you later, babe." I immediately thought of room 412 as she left, and then Mona grabbed me and pulled me onto the dance floor. After Mona, I had to dance with all the other ladies. Betty was the most brazen. As soon as the music ended, she whispered, "Do you want to go back under the mistletoe?" I said yes. Yes, of course, but I asked, "What about your husband?" "He's not here, but you are." By then, I wanted her. God knows I wanted her, but not only was she married, she was an employee and I couldn't do it. I wouldn't do to Betty's husband what Marcy had done to me, and even if I was lousy enough to do it to Betty, I knew that intimacy with an employee was a big no-no and could lead to tons and tons of problems. Then I thought, what if she's the one you find in the 412? Not a good idea, I told her. After that first time under the mistletoe, and then that dance more time under that pile of weeds, I'm going to want to do things I shouldn't. If you're worried about Tom, don't worry. He won't care if I tell him everything when I get home. That's only half the matter, Betty. Go to work at Loomis and Bainbridge or some other company, and then have Tom call me and tell me everything's okay, and I'll follow you around like a duck follows a June bug, but I'm not hanging horns with my husband or getting involved with a female employee, no matter how tempting she may be. She shrugged, stuck out her tongue, and said, "Party boy, you're no fun at all, and you'll never know what you're missing out on, because I love working for you, and I have no intention of changing jobs." All I could do was laugh and walk her back to her table. Another hour passed and the party started to wind down, and then it was time to make a decision. Do I go to room 412 or not? Do I want to risk Betty waiting for me there? I hated to turn her down twice in one night, but I would have to, and for reasons already stated. But it was almost certain that whoever was in that room was a coworker, and I'd have to turn him down as well. Better not even go. Yeah, right. There was no way I could not go and see what was in store for 412. Or maybe my thoughts were wrong. Maybe there weren't any women there. Maybe it was a bunch of people wanting to keep the party going. Whatever the case, curiosity insisted I go up to the ballroom. As I left the ballroom, I saw Mona talking on her cell phone and waved goodbye to me. When I got to room 412, I put my ear to the door to hear the sounds of the party, but either there was no party or the door was too thick for sound to pass through. I took a deep breath, slid the keycard into the slot, opened the door, and entered the room. I discovered what I expected to see less than anything else in the world. On the bed in front of me lay Ellen. She said, "You need to hurry up, Bobby. It's been a grueling evening." Afterward, I asked what she was doing there. "I woke up, Bobby. I woke up and realized that you might not be around when I was alone for a while. I had to ask myself if the freedom I wanted for a while to just be myself was worth losing you, and the answer was a resounding hell no. And here I am. If you're happy to see me, be sure to thank Mona for helping me set things up." "How do you know Mona?" "Have you forgotten that I'm an employee? I had to fill out forms for insurance and such, and Mona handled those things." Besides, I had to come to the office every 2 weeks to pick up my paycheck. Mona is a pretty smart person. She knew right away what my job was, and believe it or not, she was happy for you. She took a liking to me, and we meet for lunch at least once a week. I would even get together with her and some of the other girls from the office for drinks after work. A lot of them I've become friends with. They all helped me out today. They were supposed to get you hot. Were you lying here waiting for the party to end? Of course not, silly. Mona called me to let me know you were on your way up so I could get ready to meet you. Looks like I really owe Mona a debt of gratitude. Will an invitation to the wedding be enough? I don't know. Will there be a wedding? Are you having doubts? Well, yes. We're missing something. What? Shouldn't you propose so I can give you an answer? I rolled off the bed onto my knees on the floor and took her right hand in mine. Will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I don't know. It's a very important decision for a girl to make, and I need time to think about it. I'll give you an answer in the morning, but right now you need to come back here and help me with my ailment. Mona did indeed come to the wedding. She was Ellen's maid of honor. The end. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. So subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.